would be linked. This would be. Let me finish my point, man. Come on.
You've talked for 2 hours. We must go to the next one. What book on Islamic jurisprudence has Harris read? It seems he got his education of Islamic law from watching Fox News.
No, I've read all the Sahih Sitta books. I've read the Quran. I've read. Yeah, I know. I'm coming to that. I haven't read the actual books of fiqh. But I've read some pamphlets here and there. I've read some pamphlets here and there, which is you were so scared to actually use that.
No.
Yes, you were.
I'm so scared. I'm terrified of you, Harris. You're a towering intellect.
I can see. You need to look up. No, you're not. No, you're not. You need to look up. You need to look up the meaning of totalitarian. I mean, you have totally.
What's the meaning? What's the definition? I'm
actually surprised. No, hang on a sec. I'm actually surprised. I'm actually surprised that you actually didn't use in defense of slavery. You didn't use the example of modern day 9-to-5 job is slavery as well. You didn't use that because that's how you come up with
that
these
kind of argument is too sophisticated for you, Harris. You can't even understand the basic argument.
You know, he was so pathetic.
You couldn't even understand. I can't educate you on all these things, Harris. Respond to the argument that I gave, not another debate. Stop writing Apus's coattails. Just respond to the argument that I gave.
Because my positions are very sensible. They're very rational. They're like, okay.
It's the modern world that's destroying our ways of life. It's modern world that's destroying our families, our marriages, and clearly this is not sustainable. That's what they're going to realize. You just saying slavery, wife beating, concubines. That's all your whole argument is just putting out those words. You haven't addressed or been conversant. You haven't been conversant with any of the arguments or the points that I made, logically explaining, citing academics, citing studies.
Riffraff.
You haven't. Yeah, it's all riffraff. Academia is riffraff. I try to be objective.
Your
on a question, explain what does human rights really offer, Harris?
What human rights offer: maximizing pleasure, reducing suffering, and well-being of humanity.
No, you said maximizing pleasure, but that conflicts with the well-being of humanity. That's why
eating pig would be immoral because it's written in the Quran not to do it. But what about other things like, let's say, snail or a kangaroo? Do you think snail is halal? So you are a sadist. I mean, any sane person, and I still put my faith in humanity. And I know even most Muslims, because I've seen that. I've seen my Pakistani society.
Would a statist have this?
People don't do it.
Ultimately, Harris would be lying if he said that his problem is solely with Islam. He should be honest. The problems he has with Islam violating human rights, he has with all traditional cultures and religions that limit individual liberty for the sake of protecting marriage, family, and community. Harris should be honest. Instead of saying human rights versus Sharia, he should say human rights versus literally every traditional culture and religion in the world. Lie number 3. What is the difference between Harris Sultan and European colonizers? What is the difference between Harris Sultan and the neocons in Washington who pushed for the murderous invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan 20 years ago and continue to agitate for human rights in the Muslim world today? What is the difference? Let's call this the colonial question, because all the arguments Harris brings against Muslims in Afghanistan or Pakistan or anywhere else, all of those exact same arguments have been used by European colonizers historically against not only Muslims, but against Native Americans, against Africans, against Aboriginals, against the Chinese. When Harris says Muslims abuse women because they practice polygamy, that exact same argument was used by American settlers in the 18th and 19th century to dehumanize Native Americans and justify genociding them. When Harris says Muslims are barbaric because they use corporal punishments against criminals, that exact same argument was used by the European colonial empire against the African tribes they genocided. The real question is, does Harris think the colonial project was a good thing? After all, colonialism is what brought modern human rights to all these different parts of the world. The West invading and occupying the world to bring freedom and democracy isn't something that just happened in Iraq and Afghanistan. It's something that's been happening for over 200 years. If Harris thinks human rights are so amazing, then does he think it was a good thing that Africa was colonized or Latin America? Does he think it was a good thing that India was colonized? Wasn't it colonialism that brought his own Muslim ancestors in the subcontinent to the light of reason and human rights? So, Harris, my question is simple. Clearly, the world is not going to freely choose human rights. History has definitively proven that, and Afghanistan is only the most recent example. If you really want people to abandon their religions, abandon their ways of life, their cultural heritage, and replace them with human rights, you have to force them. And forcing people inevitably gets very brutal and very bloody. That's the only way. That's why the 19th, 20th, and 21st centuries are soaked with the blood of non-Europeans who were killed in the name of spreading freedom and democracy. So are you going to be honest, Harris, and stand by colonialism? Look, if human rights are so wonderful as you claim, Harris, then 200 years of brutal colonialism and millions of dead must have been worth it. Why don't you own it, Harris? When you advocate human rights, you're like a chef that presents this appetizing sausage to your audience, but you aren't honest about how that sausage is made. Muslims, at least, are honest. Islam is honest that spreading Islam sometimes requires war. That's acknowledged in the Quran in the example of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And I'm not equating Muslim conquest with European colonialism, by the way, because there are major differences that we can talk about. For one, Euro-American colonialism, past and present, is genocidal, and the death counts make that very clear. But my point is, you human rights activists are not honest. You don't own up to the true horrifying nature of spreading freedom and democracy. So Harris, if human rights are so brilliant and fantastic, then be consistent. Tell us that the millions of deaths and the brutal occupations are worth it. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs, right? So just own it. Stop pretending you're something you're not. You're just playing a con game. The only way you can credibly sell human rights to your audience is if you hide all these things or gloss over them. You hide the brutal history of human rights. You hide the fact that human rights destroys marriage, family, community, how it attacks every traditional way of life. You have to hide all these things because otherwise no one would buy it. And actually it would make Islam look pretty good because Islam is fighting against this human rights monster. But you can't be honest, can you, Harris? So just stop with this con game.
Okay.
We will jump into the next section, folks. Want to let you know, as mentioned, welcome to Modern Day Debate. If it's your first time here, we're a neutral platform.
It kind of reminded me of as snails. I mean, let's just go back to Sharia for a little bit. These policies by war, like, I mean, you literally want to beat people up and invade a country and tell them to have sex and make more babies.
No, that's not what I said.
So what did you say? So I want to understand. I don't straw man. When you say that you have to implement,
Islam has these policies, right? In the Sharia, you can't have premarital sex. You can't have extramarital sex. You have modesty. You have gender separation. You encourage Muslims to marry young and have children and be fertile. Those are all policies within the Sharia that when people abide by them, there is higher fertility. You have stronger families. You have healthier societies because of that. That was the argument. It's not going to war.
No, but you implied that you asked me a question. How am I going to apply that in the Western world where fertility rates are falling? So you didn't say that.
What policy are you going to institute that will increase fertility rate?
Well, first of all, immigration is the one good policy, and we can alwaing in Muslims
from other countries.
Well, there are a lot of